After 12 years of military service, including 8 in special forces, I finally held the keys to my own home. My name is James Mitchell. Most people call me Mitch. At 34 years old, I had spent my entire adult life serving my country, moving from one temporary housing situation to another. The small 2-bedroom house in Oak Ridge Estates was nothing fancy, but it represented everything I had fought for: stability, peace, and a place to call my own. The neighborhood looked like something from a real estate brochure. Perfect green lawns stretched in front of colonial-style homes with pristine facades. Children rode bicycles along smooth sidewalks while neighbors chatted over white picket fences. After years of sand, dust, and concrete barricades, the tree-lined streets felt surreal, almost too perfect. I signed the mortgage papers with a sense of accomplishment I had not felt since earning my Green Beret. My first week in the neighborhood passed in a blur of unpacking boxes and arranging furniture. Several neighbors stopped by with welcome baskets and introductions. The Johnsons from across the street brought homemade cookies. The Patels next door invited me for dinner. An elderly man named Frank, who lived 3 houses down, mentioned he had served in Vietnam and offered to help with yard work any time. The welcome packet included a thick binder of homeowners association rules. I skimmed through it, noting regulations about trash cans, lawn maintenance, and exterior modifications. Nothing seemed unreasonable, though the level of detail surprised me. 27 pages dictated everything from acceptable mailbox designs to the specific shade of tan permitted for window treatments. Still, order and structure felt familiar after military life. My introduction to the HOA board came during my second week. The monthly meeting took place in the community center, a brick building beside the neighborhood pool. I arrived early, taking a seat near the back of the room. Board members filed in, arranging themselves at a table facing rows of chairs. Most residents nodded politely in my direction. The board president, a woman in her 50s with blonde hair cut into a severe bob, stood at the podium. "I am Patricia Winters, HOA president," she announced, her gaze sweeping the room before settling on me. "I see we have a new resident. Please introduce yourself." I stood, keeping it brief. "James Mitchell, recently purchased on Maple Drive, just retired from Special Forces, happy to be here." Patricia nodded curtly, her smile not reaching her eyes. Throughout the meeting, I noticed her watching me, her expression unreadable. The other board members discussed community issues, landscaping contracts, pool maintenance, upcoming social events. Everything seemed normal, bureaucratic, but functional. The following weekend, I hung a small display box in my front window. Inside was my service flag with 3 gold stars, representing my deployments. The glass case also held my unit patch and a photograph of my team. Small and tasteful, it faced inward more than outward, a personal reminder rather than a public statement. That evening, while watering newly planted shrubs, I noticed Patricia walking slowly past my house. She paused, notepad in hand, staring at my window display. Her pen moved across the paper. She did not wave or acknowledge me standing 20 feet away. The interaction, or lack thereof, sent an unexpected chill down my spine. Something in her deliberate documentation reminded me of hostile surveillance. I dismissed the thought as paranoia, a lingering habit from deployment. This was America, my home. I had nothing to worry about. How wrong I was. October brought cooler temperatures to Oak Ridge Estates. My morning routine had solidified into comfortable predictability. I would wake at 5, a habit impossible to break after years of military discipline. After coffee on the back porch, I would take a 3-mile walk through the neighborhood. These walks served a dual purpose: physical exercise and mental clarity. The rhythmic movement helped quiet the occasional nightmares and adjustment stress that followed me home from war. Most mornings, I wore my faded camouflage jacket. The garment represented more than just warmth. It carried memories and comfort. The fabric had softened from years of wear, the pattern faded from countless washings. The right sleeve still bore a barely visible bloodstain from the day I carried my wounded radio operator to safety. I had scrubbed it countless times, but some marks never fully disappear. Like so many veterans, parts of my identity remained woven into the uniform I had worn for so long. The confrontation happened on a Tuesday morning. I had stopped at the community mailboxes, sorting through bills and advertisements, when a voice cut through my thoughts. "Excuse me." I turned to find Patricia Winters standing beside her white golf cart, clipboard in hand. Her eyes fixed pointedly on my jacket. "Good morning," I replied, nodding politely. "That attire is not appropriate for Oak Ridge Estates," she said, gesturing toward my camouflage jacket. "This is not a military base." I blinked, momentarily confused. "It is just a jacket." Patricia pulled a laminated copy of HOA regulations from her clipboard. Her manicured finger tapped against a highlighted section. Section 7, Paragraph 3 clearly states that all residents must maintain appropriate appearance that upholds community aesthetic standards. "I do not understand," I said, genuinely confused. "This is just an old military jacket. I am not violating any dress code." Her expression hardened. That aggressive military camouflage creates a threatening atmosphere. It lowers property values and makes residents uncomfortable, especially those with children. The accusation struck me like a physical blow. In all my years of service, I had never once considered my uniform threatening to American civilians, quite the opposite. I had worn it with pride, as a symbol of protection and service. "With all due respect, ma'am, I served 12 years protecting American freedoms. This jacket is part of that service." Patricia's eyes narrowed. "Nobody here cares what you did over there. You are home now. Follow the rules like everyone else." Her voice carried across the mailbox area, drawing attention from several neighbors collecting their morning mail. I noticed Mrs. Patel looking away uncomfortably. Frank, the Vietnam veteran, stared at the ground. A younger couple whispered to each other, glancing between Patricia and me. No one spoke up. "I will review the regulations," I said finally, keeping my voice level despite the anger building inside. Years of military discipline helped me maintain composure, though my hands had clenched into fists at my sides. "See that you do," Patricia replied, making a note on her clipboard before climbing back into her golf cart. "We take violations very seriously at Oak Ridge Estates." I stood motionless as she drove away, the stack of mail forgotten in my hands. The encounter left me feeling exposed and alienated in a way I had never experienced on American soil. In combat zones, threats came from identifiable enemies. Here, in the country I had defended, the attack came from an unexpected direction and targeted not my actions but my identity. The next morning, a white envelope bearing the HOA logo appeared in my mailbox. Inside, I found an official warning notice citing my military attire as contrary to community standards. The letter included a photocopy of my signature on the HOA agreement and a highlighted paragraph about maintaining neighborhood aesthetics. The final line stated that continued violations would result in fines starting at $100 per occurrence, escalating with each documented incident. I placed the letter on my kitchen counter, staring at it for a long time. The warning felt deeply personal, transcending simple rule enforcement. During my military career, I had faced life-threatening situations with tactical clarity. Yet this piece of paper left me feeling strangely vulnerable. It attacked not just my clothing choice but my identity, my service, and my right to exist as myself in my own home. That night, I hung my camouflage jacket in the closet, behind other coats where it would not be visible from the doorway. The action felt like surrender, and I did not sleep well. The warnings began to multiply with astonishing frequency. 2 days after the jacket incident, I received a citation for leaving my trash can visible from the street. According to the notice, I had returned it to my garage 15 minutes after the mandated 7:00 p.m. deadline. The following week brought a warning about my grass exceeding the maximum permitted height by approximately half an inch. Patricia seemed to possess an uncanny ability to document violations with scientific precision. The most absurd citation arrived after I placed a small American flag plant stake beside my front walkway. The notice claimed it constituted an unauthorized garden ornament, requiring prior written approval. When I checked the rulebook, I discovered 17 pages dedicated to approved landscaping elements. American flags were permitted only on designated national holidays, and only when mounted to the house in specified locations. My growing collection of violation notices might have been merely annoying if not for what happened next. While retrieving my mail one afternoon, I encountered my neighbor Alina, an elderly woman who lived alone in a meticulously maintained cottage at the end of the street. "I see Patricia has welcomed you properly," she said quietly, nodding toward the envelope in my hand bearing the distinctive HOA logo. "Does she target everyone like this?" I asked. Alina glanced around nervously before responding. "Not everyone, just certain people. The Rodriguezes got so many citations they finally moved. Then there was Dr. Amir, a lovely surgeon from Pakistan. Patricia found 23 violations in his first month. He sold at a loss after 6 weeks." "What about you?" I asked. "My grandson left his tricycle on my front porch overnight. $300 fine. When I contested it, Patricia suggested senior citizens who cannot maintain property standards should consider retirement communities." Alina's voice trembled slightly. "I have lived here for 22 years. Over the next few weeks, I discovered other targets of Patricia's selective enforcement. The single mother who worked night shifts and occasionally left her porch light on during daytime. The gay couple whose holiday decorations were deemed excessive. The pattern became clear. Patricia wielded HOA regulations as weapons against residents who did not fit her vision of an ideal community. Veterans Day approached, and I pressed my dress uniform with care. The local VFW post had invited area veterans to participate in a ceremony at the downtown memorial. I had not worn my full dress uniform since retirement, but the significance of the day warranted proper respect. As I arranged my service medals and insignia, pride mingled with melancholy for brothers and sisters who had not returned home. The doorbell rang that evening as I finished polishing my dress shoes. Patricia stood on my porch, flanked by 2 male board members I recognized from the HOA meeting. One held a camera. "Mr. Mitchell," she began without greeting, "it has come to our attention that you plan to wear a military costume tomorrow." "Excuse me," I stared in disbelief. "It is a uniform, not a costume, and tomorrow is Veterans Day." Section 12 of the HOA Code prohibits costumes and festive attire outside of designated holiday periods. Veterans Day is not listed among the approved costume holidays. The absurdity of her statement momentarily rendered me speechless. One of the men beside her photographed my reaction. "This is my formal dress uniform," I finally managed. "I am attending an official ceremony." "Our regulations do not make exceptions," Patricia replied. Military costumes fall under the festive attire prohibition. Violations begin at $500 for this category of infraction. I felt my face flush with anger. You cannot be serious. Completely serious, Mr. Mitchell. This documentation will be presented at your upcoming hearing. Hearing, I asked. Your accumulated violations warrant a formal review. You will receive official notice soon. With that, she turned and left, her associates trailing behind. That night, sitting in my immaculately maintained living room that still somehow did not feel like home, I contemplated defeat. The house represented my life savings, yet I found myself calculating how much I would lose by selling immediately. The financial cost seemed almost worth escaping the constant scrutiny and hostility. At midnight, after hours of restless packing, I finally reached for my phone. The contact had remained unused since my retirement ceremony. Colonel Robert Hayes had been my commanding officer through 2 deployments. We had faced death together in remote mountains and desert compounds. Now I hesitated, wondering if civilian problems warranted disturbing him. After 4 rings, his familiar voice answered, "Mitch, everything okay? It is midnight." "Sorry for calling so late, sir," I began, attempting a light tone that quickly crumbled. I found myself explaining the entire situation, the citations, the confrontation, the hostility toward my service. "She called your uniform a costume." The colonel's voice held barely contained fury. "Yes, sir, I know it sounds ridiculous." "It is not ridiculous, Mitch, it is unacceptable." A long pause followed. "Tell me everything else, leave nothing out." The conversation lasted nearly 2 hours. By the time we finished, something had changed inside me. I had arrived at a decision. This was not just about a camouflage jacket or holiday decorations. This was about standing ground against discrimination, about defending the right to exist with dignity. Some battles must be fought, even on home soil. "She said what to you?" Colonel Hayes' incredulous voice echoed through my phone speaker. His question required no answer. The outrage in his tone confirmed he understood the gravity of the situation. "I have been documenting everything," I explained. "Every interaction, every notice, dates and times. Military habits die hard." "Good man," Hayes replied. "Keep that up. Now listen carefully. We are not letting this stand. Give me 24 hours. True to his word, my phone buzzed exactly 24 hours later with a notification for a new group chat. The name simply read Operation Homecoming. The list of participants scrolled across my screen, 27 names, my entire former unit scattered across the country. Some I had not spoken with since retirement. All responded within minutes. Sergeant Diaz, now a civil rights attorney in California. This HOA president is operating outside legal boundaries. Federal and state laws protect against this kind of discrimination. Captain Wilson, currently a hospital administrator in Texas. Get me copies of all documentation. We need a complete history of enforcement patterns. Lieutenant Rodriguez, working in cybersecurity. Public records are showing interesting patterns in property value manipulation in that neighborhood. Also found 3 pending discrimination lawsuits against your HOA in county records. The conversation evolved with military precision, each team member applying civilian expertise to different aspects of the situation. My former intelligence specialist, Sarah Thompson, compiled a comprehensive history of Patricia's tenure as HOA president, revealing a disturbing pattern of targeting minorities, single parents, and anyone who challenged her authority. She has forced out 7 homeowners in the past 18 months, Sarah reported. All shared certain characteristics. They were either minorities, had alternative lifestyles, or otherwise did not fit her vision for the neighborhood. By day 3, our operation had expanded beyond information gathering. Colonel Hayes organized a video conference call. Familiar faces appeared on my screen in a grid formation, some in business attire, others in medical scrubs or construction gear, but all wearing the same determined expression I remembered from mission briefings. Update on tactical preparations, Hayes began, the military terminology now applied to suburban warfare. Diaz has prepared legal documentation challenging the discriminatory enforcement. Thompson has assembled evidence of selective rule application. Mitchell, what is your status on local intelligence? Inspired by our mobilization, I had begun quiet conversations with other residents. Many shared their own stories of intimidation, but had been too afraid to speak out individually. Alina provided years of meeting minutes showing how rules had been selectively modified under Patricia's leadership. Frank, the Vietnam veteran, had kept a log of his own interactions, including being cited for displaying a POW MIA flag. We have allies on the ground, I reported, at least 14 homeowners willing to provide statements. Hayes nodded approvingly. Operation Homecoming proceeds to Phase 2. We hit the ground Saturday at 900, and this time we are coming in uniform. The plan crystallized with tactical precision. My former unit would arrive in Oak Ridge Estates Saturday morning, creating a visible yet legal demonstration of support. Simultaneously, Diaz would deliver formal legal notice challenging the HOA's discriminatory practices. Local veterans organizations had been quietly notified, ensuring additional community support. Remember, Hayes emphasized before ending the call, this is not about intimidation. This is about standing together against discrimination. We are not using our military background to threaten. We are using it to uplift and protect, just as we did overseas. As preparations continued, I rediscovered something I had lost in the transition to civilian life: purpose. Each day brought new developments as team members conducted research, prepared documents, and coordinated travel arrangements. The mission parameters expanded when Rodriguez discovered that Patricia had business connections to a real estate developer interested in purchasing homes in our neighborhood at below-market rates. Classic property manipulation scheme, he explained during our update call. Create hostile living conditions for certain residents, force them to sell at a loss, then flip the properties once the neighborhood demographic changes. The day before our planned intervention, I received a hand-delivered envelope containing formal notice of an HOA hearing scheduled for Monday morning. The document listed 37 alleged violations, many fabricated or grossly exaggerated. The potential fines totaled over $7,000, with additional daily penalties accumulating until compliance was achieved. Rather than intimidating me, the notice confirmed we were moving in the right direction. Patricia must have sensed something changing in the neighborhood dynamic. Several neighbors who had previously avoided eye contact now stopped to chat openly. 3 different households brought home-cooked meals or baked goods, silent gestures of solidarity. The neighborhood tension reached its peak Friday afternoon when I discovered an anonymous note in my mailbox. The typed message, bearing no signature or return address, read simply, "Military not welcome. Sell now." I photographed the note and added it to our growing evidence file. By evening, our operation had expanded further as local news outlets received anonymous tips about potential discrimination against veterans in a prestigious suburban community. The pieces were falling into place with the same satisfying precision I had experienced during military operations. My doorbell rang late Friday evening. Standing on my porch was Marcus Reynolds, my former second-in-command and now a corporate attorney. He carried only a small overnight bag, but his presence conveyed more support than an army of strangers could have provided. "The others are at the hotel," he said quietly, "but I figured you could use company tonight." For the first time in months, I felt the tension in my shoulders release slightly. The isolation Patricia had so carefully cultivated had been broken. Whatever happened tomorrow, I was no longer fighting alone. "Come in," I replied, my voice steadier than it had been in weeks. "We have preparations to make." That night, surrounded by maps of the neighborhood and final operation plans, I slept soundly. Tomorrow would change everything. Saturday morning dawned with perfect clarity, the kind of crisp autumn day that makes suburbia look like a postcard. I rose before sunrise, military habits impossible to break even now. Marcus and I moved through the house with practiced efficiency, reviewing final details of the operation while coffee brewed. "Hayes just texted," Marcus said, checking his phone. "Everyone is assembled at the hotel. Final briefing in 20 minutes. "Any sign of countermeasures?" I asked, falling easily into operational terminology. "Thompson reports increased activity at Patricia's house. 4 board members arrived there at 6:30. They appear to be anticipating something, though not necessarily our specific plan." The week leading up to this moment had seen escalating pressure from the HOA. Patricia had increased her presence in the neighborhood golf cart, moving slowly past my house multiple times daily. Her smartphone camera documented alleged violations with religious devotion, a garden hose not properly coiled, a newspaper left on the driveway past 8:00 a.m., visitors parking partially on the street. The certified letter that had arrived midweek contained 8 pages of accumulated violations, most fabricated or exaggerated beyond recognition. The most absurd citation claimed my American flag plant stake cast an unpermitted shadow pattern on common area grass during certain hours. Yet something else had shifted in the neighborhood dynamic. Alina had organized a small gathering of concerned residents in her living room, where people shared experiences of intimidation. The Patels brought samosas to my door with a note reading, "We stand with you." Frank, the Vietnam veteran, had taken to sitting on his front porch each afternoon, deliberately wearing his old service cap, a small act of solidarity. "Status update from Thompson," Marcus announced, reading from his phone. "HOA emergency vehicles positioned at community entrances. They have placed temporary signs regarding unauthorized gatherings and trespassing enforcement. Patricia is definitely expecting something." "She has no idea what is coming," I replied. At precisely 8:30 a.m., my phone chimed with a message from Colonel Hayes. "Operation Homecoming commencing. ETA 30 minutes. Stand by." The following half hour passed with excruciating slowness. Marcus and I watched through front windows as Patricia and 2 male board members drove slowly through the neighborhood in a golf cart adorned with the HOA logo. They paused at each intersection, speaking into walkie-talkies and scanning the streets with obvious concern. "She knows something is happening, but not what," Marcus observed. "Classic information advantage." At 8:57 a.m., my phone vibrated with another message. "Moving into position. Step outside in 3 minutes." Marcus and I exchanged glances. He reached into his overnight bag and removed a carefully folded green beret, placing it with precision on his head. From my closet, I retrieved my own dress uniform, the one Patricia had called a costume. The weight of medals and insignia felt both familiar and strange as I adjusted the fit one final time. "Ready?" Marcus asked. "Ready," I confirmed. We stepped onto my front porch at exactly 9:00 a.m. The scene that greeted us would remain forever etched in my memory. At the entrance to Oak Ridge Estates, a procession had formed. Leading the column was Colonel Hayes in full dress uniform, medals catching morning sunlight across his chest. Behind him, in perfect formation, marched 25 veterans representing every branch of service: Army, Navy, Marines, Air Force, Coast Guard. Each wore their dress uniform with immaculate precision. The procession moved with disciplined silence through the neighborhood entrance. Residents began emerging from homes, first peeking through curtains, then stepping onto porches, finally moving to sidewalks. Children pointed. Adults stared. Some placed hands over hearts instinctively. Patricia's golf cart screeched to a halt at the intersection near my house. Her face contorted with expressions ranging from shock to outrage as she fumbled for her phone. The two men with her stood frozen, uncertain how to respond to this unexpected development. As the formation approached my home, I stepped forward, standing at attention. Marcus took position beside me. Without command or signal, we raised our hands in salute as Colonel Hayes approached. The moment transcended words. Brothers in arms reunited, standing together as we had in far more dangerous circumstances. For 30 seconds, the neighborhood held its breath. Then, from 3 houses down, Frank emerged wearing his Vietnam service cap. He walked slowly to the edge of his property and raised a trembling hand in salute. Across the street, another neighbor, a quiet man I had barely spoken with, stepped forward wearing a Navy cap. Down the block, an elderly woman stood on her porch beside a framed photograph of a young man in uniform. One by one, veterans and military families throughout Oak Ridge Estates revealed themselves, stepping forward in silent solidarity. What Patricia had intended to isolate had instead awakened dormant connections throughout the community. The storm had gathered, now it would break. The formation of veterans created a living monument at the center of Oak Ridge Estates. Sunlight glinted off medals and insignia as they stood at parade rest in front of my home. Neighbors gathered on sidewalks and lawns, their numbers growing by the minute. What had begun as 27 uniformed veterans now drew the attention of nearly the entire community. Patricia advanced toward us, her face flushed with anger. 2 male board members flanked her, though they maintained careful distance as if suddenly uncertain about their involvement. She clutched her clipboard like a shield, knuckles white with tension. "This is an unauthorized gathering," she announced, voice pitched to carry across the assembled crowd. "You are all trespassing on private community property. I have already contacted law enforcement." Colonel Hayes stepped forward from the formation. At 6'3" with shoulders broadened by decades of service, his presence commanded attention without effort. When he spoke, his voice carried the natural authority of a man who had led others through life-and-death situations. "Good morning, Ms. Winters. I am Colonel Robert Hayes, United States Army Special Forces, retired. These men and women are all legally invited guests of homeowner James Mitchell. We are standing on his property or public sidewalks. No trespassing has occurred." Patricia's eyes narrowed. The HOA regulations clearly prohibit gatherings of more than 5 non-residents without prior board approval. Section 15, Paragraph 9. "Interestingly," Colonel Hayes replied, reaching into his breast pocket to withdraw several folded papers, "our legal team has reviewed your HOA regulations extensively. That particular rule was implemented 4 months ago without proper notification to all homeowners as required by state law. It appears to be one of 17 recent rule changes that failed to follow legally required procedures." The crowd murmured as Hayes continued. Furthermore, state law protects the right of military veterans to wear uniforms at ceremonies, gatherings, and private functions. Your attempt to classify a military uniform as a costume violates both federal and state statutes regarding veteran rights. Patricia's composure began to crack. This is intimidation. You are trying to intimidate the board with military presence. No, ma'am, Hayes replied calmly. This is solidarity. There is a difference. A vehicle pulled into the cul-de-sac, a local news van with a satellite dish mounted on top. Sarah Thompson, our former intelligence specialist, had executed her part of the operation perfectly. The cameraman emerged, equipment already recording. Ms. Winters, Hayes continued, aware now that every word was being documented, these Americans have bled for your right to speak freely, even disrespectfully. They have endured separation from family, physical pain, and watched brothers and sisters fall so that you could live in peace. And yet you believe their very appearance disgraces your neighborhood. The camera focused on Patricia as her expression shifted between anger and sudden awareness of public scrutiny. A reporter approached, microphone extended. We understand there is a situation involving discrimination against veterans in this community, the reporter began. Can you comment on allegations that the HOA has specifically targeted military veterans with selective rule enforcement? Patricia stepped backward. This is a private community matter. The media has no right to be here. Actually, the reporter replied, we were invited by several homeowners concerning a matter of public interest. Discrimination against protected classes, including veterans, is not a private matter. More neighbors had gathered, forming a loose circle around the confrontation. I noticed Elena standing near the front, her normally timid posture now straight and determined. The Patels had emerged from their home, along with the Rodriguez family from down the street. Even residents I had never spoken with stood watching, their presence a silent referendum. Patricia turned to the board members beside her, clearly expecting support. One looked at the ground, avoiding eye contact. The other stepped backward slightly, creating physical distance between himself and the HOA president. These people, Patricia said, gesturing toward our formation, are creating a threatening atmosphere. They are dressed for war in our peaceful neighborhood. No, ma'am, I spoke for the first time, my voice steady. We are dressed in the formal uniforms of the United States Armed Forces. These are not combat fatigues. These are the ceremonial uniforms worn at inaugurations, state dinners, and formal military functions. They represent honor, sacrifice, and service. The camera swung toward me as I continued. I purchased my home in Oak Ridge Estates believing it represented the American dream I fought to protect. Instead, I found systematic discrimination against anyone who did not fit a narrow definition of acceptability. Elena stepped forward, her voice surprisingly strong. Patricia fined me $300 when my grandson left his tricycle on my porch overnight. She suggested I should move to a retirement community. Frank, the Vietnam veteran, joined in. I received a violation notice for displaying a POW MIA flag. When I contested it, my water pressure mysteriously decreased for 2 weeks. One by one, residents began sharing experiences of intimidation and selective enforcement. The cameraman moved through the crowd, recording testimonials that painted a disturbing pattern of discrimination. Patricia's face drained of color as the public narrative slipped irrevocably from her control. This is all fabricated, she insisted, voice rising. These people are conspiring against legitimate HOA operations. "We have documentation," Colonel Hayes replied calmly. "Every incident, every selective enforcement, every rule changed without proper procedure, every discriminatory action." At that moment, a police cruiser pulled into the cul-de-sac. Patricia's expression brightened momentarily until two officers emerged and approached Colonel Hayes directly. "Colonel," the older officer said with respect, extending his hand. "Captain Reynolds, Police Department. Vietnam, 71 to 73, Military Police. My chief asked me to personally respond when we heard what was happening. Is everything under control here?" "Yes, Captain," Hayes replied. "We are simply exercising our right to peaceful assembly and free expression." The officer nodded, then turned to Patricia. "Ma'am, I understand you called about trespassing." "These people are creating a disturbance," she insisted. "They are intimidating residents with military display." The officer looked at the assembled veterans standing in disciplined formation, then at the neighbors freely gathering on sidewalks and lawns. "I do not see any disturbance, ma'am. I see American citizens peacefully assembled. No laws are being broken." Patricia's composure finally shattered. "You are all against me. This neighborhood was perfect before these people started moving in." The outburst, captured by news cameras and dozens of smartphone videos, revealed what many had long suspected. The mask of rule enforcement had slipped, exposing the prejudice beneath. Patricia stormed toward her golf cart, nearly tripping in her haste. The two board members remained behind, looking increasingly uncomfortable. One of them, a man named Thomas who had served on the board for 5 years, stepped forward hesitantly. "On behalf of the board, I think we need to revisit some of our enforcement policies. Perhaps an emergency meeting is in order." The foundation of Patricia's authority had crumbled in less than an hour. Operation HOA Freedom had achieved its primary objective. The story dominated local news for 3 consecutive days. HOA president confronted by Special Forces unit defending veteran homeowner ran as the headline, accompanied by footage capturing the entire confrontation. Social media amplified the coverage, drawing attention from national veterans organizations and civil rights groups. Patricia Winters became an unwitting internet sensation, her meltdown viewed hundreds of thousands of times. The emergency HOA meeting, held 4 days after our intervention, overflowed the community center. Residents who had never participated in neighborhood governance arrived early to secure seats. The atmosphere crackled with energy, not anger but determination for meaningful change. Patricia did not attend. Her resignation letter, read aloud by the vice president, cited health concerns rather than acknowledging any wrongdoing. The assembled residents listened in silence, then erupted into spontaneous applause when the letter concluded. The interim board, led by Thomas and 2 other long-serving members, proposed immediate reforms. A complete review of all rule changes implemented during Patricia's tenure would be conducted. All pending violations would be suspended pending evaluation by an independent committee. Most significantly, a new board election was scheduled, with all positions open to community vote. When nominations began, I was surprised to hear my name called from 3 different sections of the room. Eleanor stood, her voice clear and determined. "I nominate James Mitchell for the board. We need someone who understands both leadership and service." Frank seconded the nomination immediately. Others followed, the Patels, the Rodriguezes, and more than a dozen residents I barely knew. The momentum of change had transformed into something more meaningful than simple rebellion against Patricia's regime. 3 weeks later, the election results were announced. The new HOA board included myself, Eleanor, Thomas, Mrs. Rodriguez, and Dr. Patel, a diverse group representing different backgrounds, ages, and perspectives. Our first official act removed 17 discriminatory rules implemented during Patricia's presidency. Colonel Hayes called the evening after our first board meeting. "Mission accomplished, soldier?" he asked, humor warming his voice. "Different kind of mission, sir," I replied. "No end date on this deployment." "The best ones never really end," he agreed. "Building community is harder than winning battles. It takes longer but matters more." The transformation of Oak Ridge Estates continued through small, meaningful changes. The community newsletter now included profiles of diverse residents, celebrating their contributions and backgrounds. Monthly social gatherings replaced formal inspection schedules. When rule violations occurred, they were addressed with conversation rather than immediate fines. Spring arrived with remarkable changes visible throughout the neighborhood. American flags appeared on porches without fear of citation. Children's toys occasionally remained on lawns overnight without penalty. Gardens displayed more individuality, though still maintained with care. The community felt alive rather than merely ordered. 6 months after Operation HOA Freedom, we held our first neighborhood barbecue in the community park. Families gathered around picnic tables laden with dishes representing diverse culinary traditions. Children played on freshly maintained equipment, while adults conversed across previously unbridged social divides.